The ultrasound photograph tore with a sound too small for the hall that held it. For one suspended second, no one breathed. The storm pressed its wet hands against the tall windows of the Veyron estate, turning the garden beyond into streaks of black and silver. Beneath the chandelier, Rowan Hale stood barefoot on the cold marble, one hand curled around the loose front of his coat. The fragments of the photograph drifted down between him and Adrian Veyron like ruined snow. "This is not my child," Adrian said. His voice did not rise. That was what made it crueler. If he had shouted, Rowan might have blamed the storm, the poison of rumor, the old men watching from the stairs. But Adrian's words were quiet, polished, final. They landed in the hall with more force than any blade his family had ever drawn. Even the servants near the side doors lowered their eyes as if they had witnessed an execution rather than a quarrel between husbands. Rowan looked at the torn pieces on the floor. One fragment showed the blurred curve of something small and impossible to defend. Earlier that afternoon, a doctor had told him the heartbeat was steady. He had thought of Adrian first. Foolishly. He had imagined the man's severe face softening by the smallest degree. He had imagined silence. Perhaps. But not rejection. Never this. "Adrian," he said, and his own voice sounded unfamiliar. "Look at me once before you decide." Adrian did look at him. Yet when Rowan needed one human flicker behind those eyes, Adrian gave him nothing but a door closing. On the second-floor landing, Isolde Veyron watched with her gloved hands resting on the carved railing. Beside her stood two elders in dark suits. At the edge of the hall, Dr. Marlowe kept his medical bag clutched against his chest. A bead of sweat slipped from his temple despite the cold. The report was verified. Isolde said gently. Her voice carried the softness of a silk ribbon tightening around the throat. No one wanted this to be true. "Rowan, for the sake of the child, you should stop making it uglier." Rowan's fingers pressed into his coat until the fabric wrinkled beneath his palm. Beneath it, his lower abdomen was still flat, the secret life inside too small to be seen by those who had already condemned it. For the sake of the child, they used the child now. After stripping it of its father with a few sheets of paper and a test Rowan had never agreed to take. "I never went to that hotel," Rowan said. He turned from Isolde back to Adrian, because it was still Adrian who mattered. "You know where your people put me. Who followed me. Who reported every step I took. Ask anyone who was with me that day." A muscle moved once in Adrian's jaw. Rowan saw it because he had spent 2 years learning the small weather of this man's restraint. Adrian angry was silent. Adrian hurt was colder. Adrian uncertain became still enough to resemble stone. That tiny movement should have been the seam where doubt entered. But the paper in Adrian's hand remained steady, and the distance between them did not shrink. The guards were changed that week. Adrian said, "Only that. No accusation. No explanation." But Rowan understood the hidden sentence beneath it. "You could have done what they claim. You could have betrayed me. You could have carried another Alpha's child into my house." The bond mark at the side of Rowan's neck pulsed with a dull ache beneath his collar. Adrian had never spoken tenderly of it. Yet he had left lamps on when Rowan returned late, sent medicine during fevers, and silenced elders who insulted him. Rowan had gathered those small things like crumbs, never daring to call them affection. Tonight, every crumb turned to ash. "If you believed I was capable of this," Rowan said slowly, "why did you let me stay beside you at all?" The question moved through the hall like a draft. One servant flinched. Dr. Marlowe's grip tightened around his bag. Even Isolde's gaze sharpened, though her mouth remained curved with regret. Adrian did not answer at once. There was a terrible fatigue beneath his eyes, something sleepless and raw that might have been grief if he had allowed it to be named. but pride stood before it like a locked gate. "Because I mistook quietness for loyalty," he said. Rowan's face went white. Some wounds did not bleed outward. They opened inward, flooding places no one else could see. Rowan had endured indifference in this house. Suspicion. The corridors where servants stopped speaking when he passed. He had endured being introduced as Adrian's Omega, but never quite as his spouse. But this sentence struck somewhere older than marriage. It told him that even his silence had been used as evidence against him. The storm shook the windows. Adrian's hand closed around the remaining half of the report until the page creased. He wanted, with a violence that sickened him, for Rowan to deny it in a way that could save them both. Instead, Rowan stood there too pale, too still. One hand protecting a child Adrian had just refused. That hand was unbearable. Adrian looked away first. Rowan saw it. Adrian did not turn away because he hated him. He turned away because he could not bear to see what his own judgment was doing. And still, he chose not to stop. "Tell me to leave," Rowan said. No one moved. Adrian's eyes returned to him. "What? If that is what you want, say it yourself." Rowan's voice no longer shook. "Do not let your aunt say it for you. Do not let the elders write it into a document. If I am filthy enough to be thrown away, then look at me and say it." Isolde's expression thinned. "Rowan, dramatics will not." "Enough," Adrian said. The single word silenced the landing. For a brief, foolish heartbeat. Rowan almost hoped. Adrian stepped closer, and the familiar cedar and smoke scent of his alpha pheromone cut through the damp air. It had once unsettled Rowan. Later, against his better judgment, it had become the scent his body recognized as safety. Tonight it felt like standing near a fire that would not warm him. Adrian stopped an arm's length away. His gaze dropped, almost unwillingly, to Rowan's abdomen. His face changed for less than a second. So quickly no one on the stairs could have seen it. A fracture, a hesitation. Rowan held his breath, because the heart was a foolish organ and did not know when to stop begging. Then Adrian said, "Leave the Veyron estate before dawn." The hope died so quietly Rowan almost did not recognize it. He nodded, not because he accepted the accusation, but because there was a child inside him, and the child could not afford for him to collapse at the feet of people who wanted proof of weakness. Rowan bent with care, though his knees threatened to give way, and picked up the largest fragment of the ultrasound. He folded it once and placed it inside his coat. "Do not take anything bought with Veyron money," one elder said from above. Rowan paused. Adrian's head turned slightly, but he did not rebuke the man. That silence settled the matter more thoroughly than any order. "I came here with one suitcase," Rowan said. "You may keep the rest." He walked past Adrian without touching him. The bond mark at Rowan's neck burned, as though protesting what pride and lies had already severed. Adrian smelled the faint sweetness beneath Rowan's rain-damp scent. The changed undertone he had ignored for weeks. Pregnant Omega. His instincts recognized what his mind rejected. And for one brutal instant his hand lifted. No one saw it except Rowan in the reflection of the dark window. The hand stopped before it reached him. That was how Rowan remembered leaving, not with Adrian's hatred at his back, but with his almost touch. An unfinished gesture could be crueler than a slap. It said Adrian had stood close enough to choose differently, and had not. Outside, the rain swallowed him whole. The courtyard lamps burned in trembling halos. No driver came. No umbrella appeared. The iron gates waited at the end of the drive, crowned with the Veyron crest. Rowan had once thought the wolf and thorn emblem looked lonely. Tonight, it looked hungry. Halfway down the drive, pain tightened across his lower abdomen. He stopped. One hand braced against a wet cypress trunk. Breath caught between his teeth. Not now. He told his body. Not here. Behind him. The estate glowed with cruel warmth. Every room belonging to people who would sleep beneath dry roofs after tearing his life apart. At the gate, the guard on duty could not meet his eyes. He opened the smaller side door without speaking. Rowan stepped through, and the gate closed behind him with a sound like a final judgment. Only then did he sink to his knees on the roadside. Rain streaming down his hair, his collar, his trembling hands. The ultrasound fragment had softened inside his coat. Rowan pulled it out with desperate care. The image was blurred, half ruined, almost meaningless to anyone else. To him, it was the only witness left. He pressed it against his chest, bending over it to shield it from the rain. And the first sob tore out of him without permission. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The child gave no answer. No movement. No sign that it understood the world had already tried to deny it. Rowan laid one hand over his stomach and forced himself to breathe through the pain. "He doesn't know you," he said, though he did not know whether he was comforting the child or himself. "That is his sin, not yours. Whatever they call you, whatever they take from us, you are not shame. You are not a mistake." Behind an unlit window on the second floor, Adrian watched the small figure leave the gate. He did not move for a long time. In his hand, hidden from the elders who were already discussing legal dissolution, lay the other torn half of the ultrasound photograph. He had not meant to keep it. His fingers had closed around it when Rowan bent to gather the pieces. An instinct so swift and shameful he had concealed before anyone noticed. "Adrian," Isolde said from behind him, "you did what had to be done." Had he, the words should have steadied him. They did not. Down at the gate, Rowan had vanished into the rain, leaving the long road empty. Adrian looked at the half-photograph until the ink began to bleed from the dampness of his hand. Beneath the storm, a sound like a child's heartbeat seemed to echo. By dawn, Rowan reached the south terminal with fever burning under his skin. The station smelled of diesel and stale coffee. Rowan bought the cheapest ticket to a coastal town whose name he barely knew and sat beneath a broken advertisement board. He kept his head down, coat wrapped around himself, one hand never leaving his abdomen. Every announcement sounded too loud. When the first bus pulled into the bay, Rowan tried to stand. The floor tilted. Pain flashed white and immediate, stealing the air from his lungs. He caught the edge of the bench, but his fingers slipped on rainwater. The ultrasound fragment fluttered from his coat and landed face up on the dirty tile. Rowan collapsed beside it. No one noticed at first. Then an old woman cried out, and footsteps approached. Across the street, inside a parked black sedan, a man lowered his phone from his ear. He had followed from the estate at Isolde Veyron's order. He looked at the unconscious Omega, at the ruined photograph near his hand, and hesitated before reporting what he had seen. "Don't come out no matter what you hear," Rowan said, one palm pressed flat against the narrow cupboard door. The boy inside did not argue. That was what frightened Rowan most. Lucien was 5, small enough to fit between shelves of bandages and disinfectant. But there was an oldness in his silence that made Rowan's throat tighten. Outside the records room, a man was shouting in the clinic corridor, the wet slam of his boots echoing over the midnight rain. "Papa," Lucien whispered through the crack. "He smells angry." Rowan shut his eyes for one breath. "Then do not let him smell you." He turned the key before the child could answer. The metal clicked softly, a sound Lucien had learned to hate and obey. Rowan tucked the key beneath his sleeve, straightened the collar of his grey work coat, and stepped away from the cupboard with the calmness he had practiced until it became another skin. Beyond the frosted glass panel, the corridor lights flickered. turning the shouting man's shadow into something large and broken. 5 years ago, Rowan Hale had collapsed on a bus station floor with rain in his lungs and a torn ultrasound photograph in his hand. By morning, a retired midwife had written Rowan Vale on a clinic intake form because the young Omega could not risk giving a name powerful people might recognize. He had not corrected her. Names were lighter than lives. They could be folded, hidden, burned, replaced. The child inside him had needed a father who was alive more than a name that was true. Since then, survival had become ritual. Rent paid early. Locks checked twice. Suppressants diluted to stretch the bottle another week. Clinic shifts taken after dark because night paid more and asked fewer questions. Rowan translated forms, filed records, and never allowed Lucien to appear in official ABO screenings. The Harbour District forgot quickly and asked almost nothing, which made it the safest kind of mercy. Tonight, however, shadows had grown teeth. The shouting stopped as Rowan opened the records room door. In the corridor, 2 nurses stood frozen behind the reception desk. Dr. Bell, the physician on duty, had one hand raised in useless warning. The man blocking the hallway was broad, rain-soaked, and bleeding from a shallow cut above his eyebrow. His pheromones leaked sour and aggressive into the air. Not alpha, but close enough to unsettle weaker bodies. "You," the man said, turning toward Rowan with ugly recognition. "You're the clerk who wrote my brother's name wrong." Rowan paused at a careful distance. "I corrected the file last week." "You corrected nothing. Because of your paper mistake, he got transferred before our people arrived." The man staggered closer. "You think I don't know what you are, pretty Omega, hiding in a clinic, pretending to be useful." A nurse made a small sound. Rowan did not. Panic. He had learned. Wasted oxygen. He kept his hands visible, his breathing slow, and his body angled so the locked cupboard remained behind the line of his shoulder. The child inside had gone utterly quiet. That silence pressed harder on Rowan than the man's threats. "If there is an issue with a transfer record," Rowan said, "Dr. Bell can review it in the morning. You are injured. Sit down first." The man laughed, ordering me around. "No," Rowan's voice stayed mild, "keeping you from bleeding on the floor." For an instant, the absurd practicality of the answer unsettled the corridor. Rowan was good at this, lowering knives without touching them, offering pride a way to retreat. He had negotiated with feverish fishermen, abandoned Omegas, smugglers who came in bleeding but refused police reports. He knew that most violent men needed an audience more than victory. This one needed someone to hurt. He moved too quickly. His hand clamped around Rowan's wrist and slammed him back against the filing cabinets. Pain sparked through Rowan's shoulder. Somewhere behind the locked cupboard door, something shifted. Rowan's first fear was not for himself. It rose clean and bright, cutting through everything else. "Do not come out. Please. Lucien. Do not come out." The man leaned close enough that Rowan smelled cheap liquor beneath rainwater. "You think because you talk soft, no one can break you. I think," Rowan said, "that if you hurt me here, the clinic will stop protecting your family's records." The man's grip tightened. A bruise would form there by morning. Rowan felt old memory rise in his body, marble beneath bare feet. Rain in his hair. Adrian's voice following him through childbirth and fever. "This is not my child." Pain could be survived. Being disbelieved was what taught the soul to sleep with one eye open. The cupboard door rattled once. Rowan's heart stopped. "Lucien," he said softly, the name escaping before he could swallow it. The corridor changed. It began with temperature. The rain-chilled air seemed to sharpen. All dampness cut away by something clean and cold. The man holding Rowan stiffened. Dr. Bell's face drained of colour. Then a scent unfurled from behind the records room door, young, untrained, but unmistakable in its bloodline purity. Cedar smoke beneath winter iron, a dominant alpha's warning. Impossible from a child, and yet there. Raw enough to make every adult body in the hallway recognize danger before reason could argue. The dock enforcer released Rowan as if burned. The cupboard door opened from the inside. Lucien stood there in his oversized sweater. Dark hair damp from sleep, sweat. Grey eyes fixed on the man who had touched his father. One hand clutched the wooden rabbit Rowan had carved from a broken drawer handle when they had nothing else for a birthday gift. "Don't touch him," Lucien said. No child's voice should have carried that kind of command. Rowan moved before anyone else could recover. He crossed the room, knelt, and wrapped both arms around Lucien, forcing the boy's face against his shoulder. "Enough," he whispered into his hair. "Come back to me. It's all right. I'm all right." Lucien trembled once. The scent buckled, flared, then folded inward with the painful obedience of a child trying to control a storm inside his ribs. Rowan held him through it, one hand cupped over the back of his head, the other hiding the shaking in his own fingers. "Dr. Bell recovered first. Mr. Vale," he said, too carefully. "Your son. He is frightened," Rowan replied. Everyone in the corridor heard the warning beneath the answer. Not a plea, not an explanation, a boundary. "Doctor?" Bell closed his mouth. The enforcer, suddenly sober, backed away with a muttered curse and allowed the nurses to lead him toward an examination room. No one mentioned the scent. In the harbour district, survival depended on knowing which truths should not be given names. But one person had already named it. Across the narrow street, under the awning of a shuttered pharmacy, Milo Saye lowered his cigarette without taking a drag. 5 years had thickened his face. But guilt had kept his memory precise. He had once followed a pregnant Omega from the Veyron estate to the South Terminal and called Isolde Veyron with a lie half made of mercy. He had said the Omega boarded a bus east. He had not said an old midwife carried him into a clinic when he fainted. Milo had not expected to see Rowan Hale alive behind clinic glass. Thinner now, colder now, with a child who smelled like the man who had destroyed him. Veyron blood had a signature. Old soldiers in the family called it a myth to flatter themselves. But Milo had guarded Adrian long enough to know better. Cedar smoke beneath metal frost. The scent that made even armed men think of kneeling. Milo's hand shook as he took out his phone. Far from the harbour, the Veyron estate stood under a different reign. Adrian Veyron had not slept in the master bedroom for 3 years. He used the west study instead, a room with locked windows, 3 exits, and a fireplace that smoked no matter how often servants cleaned it. At 34. He had become what the old families wanted and feared a head of house who never hesitated in public, never forgave debts twice, never allowed rivals to see grief. No Omega had crossed the private threshold since Rowan left. Isolde had once suggested remarriage, speaking of alliances and heirs as if discussing winter horses. Adrian had listened until she finished. Then he had ordered every marriage file burned in the courtyard. In the locked drawer of his desk lay half of an ultrasound photograph. Its torn edge faded by years he refused to count. A knock sounded. Adrian closed the drawer. "Come in." Cassian, his chief aide, entered with a tablet in hand and rein on his shoulders. "Report from the harbour district," he said, unverified. It came through an old channel. Adrian did not reach for the tablet at once. Old channels usually carry old lies. This one used your private cipher from before the Succession War. That made the room still. Adrian took the tablet. The message was brief, almost clumsy, as if written by a man afraid of every word he chose. Rowan Hale may be alive under the name Rowan Vale, child observed. Marley, approximately 5 years old. Unregistered alpha presentation. Pheromone signature strongly resembles Veyron direct bloodline. For a long moment, Adrian did not move. The fire cracked once in the hearth. When did this arrive? Adrian asked. 11 minutes ago. Who sent it? Milo Saye. The name returned from a corridor Adrian had sealed in his mind. One of Isolde's outer men. Present the night Rowan left. Adrian had forgotten him, which now felt less like oversight than design. Cassian waited. Should I send a team? Adrian's fingers tightened around the tablet until the glass gave a faint warning creak. In his mind. Rowan stood again beneath the chandelier, asking him to say the words himself. Adrian had looked. Adrian had said it. He had called exile justice because doubt had been easier than trust. No team, Adrian said. Cassian blinked. Sir, if Rowan Hale is alive, armed men will make him run. Adrian set the tablet down with deliberate care. Finned Milo. Quietly. Confirm the clinic. No contact with the child. The last word altered the air. Child. Not target. Not asset. Not possible heir. Cassian heard the difference and lowered his eyes. And if the report is false, he asked. Adrian looked toward the rain-dark window. In the glass. His reflection seemed older than 34. Stripped of the authority that made others step aside. If it is false, Adrian said, then someone has chosen a cruel way to die. Back in the harbour district, Rowan sat on the clinic floor with Lucien asleep against his chest. Dr. Bell had promised, with more fear than conviction, that no report would be filed tonight. Rowan thanked him because politeness cost less than trust. Lucien's fever had risen after the pheromone flare. His small fingers clung to Rowan's sleeve even in sleep. Rowan brushed damp hair from the child's forehead and felt the old terror return. Not as a storm this time, but as a tide. Slow, certain, coming for them from far away. You were not supposed to inherit his anger, Rowan murmured. Lucien shifted, lashes trembling. Did I scare you? The question broke something gentle in Rowan. He bent and kissed the child's temple, breathing through the ache in his chest. No, you scared the part of me that wants to keep you small forever. Lucien did not understand, and perhaps that was mercy. He pressed the wooden rabbit between them and slept again. Outside, rain slid down the clinic windows. On the glass, Rowan saw his own reflection older, paler, still standing. Rowan closed his eyes, but the image remained. At dawn, a black car rolled out of the capital toward the sea. The black car stopped 3 streets away from the clinic, where the harbour smell overpowered even expensive leather. Adrian did not step out at once. Through the tinted window, the harbour district looked nothing like the capital that feared his name. Here, buildings leaned toward one another as if exhausted by rain. Laundry hung beneath rusted balconies, and fishermen moved through the morning fog with shoulders curved against the wind. No one looked rich enough to bribe or important enough to threaten. It was the kind of place powerful families forgot existed until someone hid something valuable inside it. Rowan had lived here for 5 years. The thought settled in Adrian's chest with a weight he could not arrange into anger. He had imagined many versions of Rowan over the years, despite himself dead. Remarried. Ruined. Perhaps living quietly under another alpha's protection. Each imagined version had been easier to endure than the possibility that Rowan had survived by becoming invisible. Invisible meant Adrian had not merely lost him. He had made disappearance necessary. Cassian sat in the front passenger seat, watching him through the mirror without seeming to. Milo confirmed the clinic. Rowan Vale works, the late records shift, and occasional translation desk. The child attends no registered nursery. No ABO file exists. No file. Adrian repeated. None that we found. A child with no ABO file was not merely hidden. He was erased before the world could claim him. Adrian looked toward the fog-veiled street ahead. He should have admired the precision of it. Rowan had always been underestimated because he did not announce his intelligence. In the Veyron estate, silence had made people think him harmless. Now that same silence had carried him past every net the old families used to mark bloodlines and ownership. Adrian opened the door. No one approaches unless I call. Cassian's expression tightened. If this is a trap, then it is a patient one. Adrian said, 5 years is longer than most men can afford to lie. The clinic stood at the corner of a narrow road, its green sign flickering above the entrance, even in daylight. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic, damp coats, and cheap tea. A woman at reception looked up, saw the cut of Adrian's coat and the men lingering too far behind him, and immediately decided he was not someone who belonged here. Her fear was quick but practiced. Harbor people knew how to survive by noticing danger without inviting it closer. I'm looking for Mr. Val, Adrian said. The receptionist's gaze dropped to the silver ring on his right hand, then moved away. Records office is closed until evening. I can wait. She seemed about to refuse when a door opened down the corridor. Rowan stepped out, carrying a box of patient files against his hip. For 5 years, Adrian had trained himself not to react to wounds. Gunfire, betrayal, blood on marble. Men begging through broken teeth, none of it had ever made his face change before others. But the sight of Rowan standing beneath the clinic's weak fluorescent light struck him with such quiet violence that he forgot, for 1 second, the shape of the mask he wore. Rowan was thinner than before. Not fragile, never that, but pared down, as if life had taken everything decorative and left only what could endure. His hair was tied loosely at the nape, his sleeves rolled to the wrist, and there was a faint bruise beneath the cuff of one hand. His face had lost the softness Adrian remembered and gained something more difficult to approach composure without trust. The file box slipped half an inch in Rowan's grip before he steadied it. Adrian saw that too. Mr. Vale, the receptionist said carefully. Rowan's eyes remained on Adrian. In them, recognition arrived and was buried almost in the same breath. The movement was so controlled that anyone else might have missed it. Adrian did not. Once, he had studied Rowan's silence to decide whether it hid betrayal. Now he saw what he should have seen. Then Rowan's silences were rooms with locked doors, and each one protected something alive. Can I help you? Rowan asked. Not Adrian. Not why are you here. Not even how did you find me. Adrian crossed the waiting room slowly. He stopped far enough away that no one could mistake the distance for intimacy. I need records translated from a harbor shipment clinic. Your name was recommended. Rowan lowered the file box onto the counter. His fingers were steady now. Translation requests go through Dr. Bell. I prefer direct arrangements. That may be true where you come from. Rowan's voice was polite, almost mild. Here, we use forms. The receptionist stared at the paperwork as if it might save her. Cassian, waiting outside by the glass door, lowered his eyes to hide whatever judgment had crossed his face. Adrian felt something almost like pain move beneath his ribs. Rowan had once stood barefoot in his hall and asked to be believed. Now he stood in a public clinic and offered bureaucracy like a wall. Then give me the forms, Adrian said, Rowan reached behind the counter and took out a clipboard. When he held it toward Adrian, their fingers did not touch. That absence was deliberate. Adrian accepted the clipboard, though he had no need of it, and looked down at blank lines asking for name, contact, purpose of request. Under reason for translation, he wrote, "Only private inquiry." Rowan read it when Adrian returned the clipboard. A faint shadow crossed his mouth. "Private inquiries are expensive. I can pay." "I'm sure you can." Rowan placed the clipboard aside. "But money does not shorten procedure." The words had no obvious blade. Yet Adrian felt the edge. Money had bought physicians, guards, silence, forged paper. It had not bought 5 lost years. It would not buy Rowan's lowered guard now. From deeper inside the clinic came the soft patter of running feet. Rowan's body changed before the child appeared. It was not dramatic. His shoulders lowered. His breath shifted. And the line of his body turned subtly toward the corridor. Protection was not a decision for him anymore. It had become instinct. A boy rounded the corner with a paper cup held in both hands. "Papa." Aunt Belle said the tea is too hot. He stopped. The corridor seemed to narrow around him. Lucien was small, almost severe in his neat, dark sweater, with hair falling over his brow and eyes too grey for the warm-skinned harbour people around him. He looked at Adrian without fear at first. Only assessment. Then the child inhaled. Adrian felt it like a hand closing around his throat. The boy's scent was faint beneath clinic disinfectant and Rowan's carefully neutral suppressants. But blood recognized blood before law did. Cedar smoke under winter iron, not identical to Adrian's. Not yet matured, but threaded from the same origin so unmistakably that denial would have required madness. Lucien stared back at him with Adrian's own eyes set inside Rowan's guarded face. The paper cup tilted. Hot tea spilled across the floor. Rowan moved instantly. He stepped between Adrian and the child, taking Lucien's wrist with gentle firmness. "Did it burn you?" Lucien shook his head, still looking around Rowan's side. Who is he? A simpler question. A child's question. It entered the clinic with no awareness of the years it tore open. Rowan knelt and wiped the tea from Lucien's sleeve with a cloth from the counter. His answer came after half a breath too long. "A client." Adrian watched Rowan's hand cover the child's wrist. The gesture was tender. Yes. But more than tender, it was barricade. Oath. Apology. Warning. There was a small scar near Rowan's thumb. One Adrian did not remember. There were many things he did not remember because he had never had the right to witness them. Lucien's gaze remained sharp. "He smells familiar." Rowan's hand stilled. The receptionist looked as if she wanted to vanish behind the desk. Dr. Bell appeared at the end of the corridor, took in the scene, and went pale with a speed that confirmed too much. Adrian did not look away from the child. He had seen heirs presented before councils, newborns lifted beneath chandeliers, bloodlines celebrated as if babies were treaties. None of those children had looked at him like this, curious. "To vary," unclaimed. "Lucien," Rowan said, quiet but firm. "Go back to Dr. Bell." The boy's small jaw tightened. Adrian saw himself in that too, and hated the recognition. Lucien did not obey immediately. His attention moved from Adrian's face to Rowan's hand, then back again. Only when Rowan's fingers squeezed once did he turn and walk toward Dr. Bell. He did not run. Pride, even in a child, could learn from fear. When Lucien disappeared through the inner door, Rowan rose. The air between them had changed. Before, Adrian had come with suspicion, arranged into a shape he could manage. Now suspicion was useless. The truth stood in a child's height, wore a sweater with mended cuffs, and called Rowan Papa. "We need to speak." Adrian said. "No." Rowan replied. Rowan. The name struck the room harder than either of them expected. The receptionist looked down. Dr. Bell. Halfway through closing the inner door. Froze. Rowan's face did not change. But Adrian saw the pulse move once at his throat. Above the collar that hid an old bond mark neither of them had mentioned. "My name is Mr. Vale here," Rowan said. "Not to me." A colder person might have laughed. Rowan did not. He looked at Adrian with a quietness so complete it became almost merciful. "You gave up the right to decide what I am called." Adrian accepted the blow because it was deserved. Is he mine? The question stripped the clinic of sound. Somewhere outside, a gull cried over the harbour. Rainwater dripped steadily from the awning into a metal bucket near the door. The ordinary world continued with insulting calm, while two lives stood on the edge of a truth too large for the room. Rowan looked at him for a long time. "You should be more careful with that word." "Mine." "Yes." Rowan's voice remained low. "You have always been careless with things after calling them yours." Adrian's face tightened. "I am asking if Lucien is my son." At the child's name in Adrian's mouth, something passed over Rowan's expression that no power could have forced from him. Fear, anger, grief, all bound tightly around love. He moved closer by half a step. Not enough to invite intimacy. Only enough to make sure Adrian heard every word. "You tore his first picture before he was born." Rowan said. "What answer do you think you deserve?" Adrian could not speak. For 5 years, he had kept half an ultrasound photograph in a locked drawer like a wound he refused to treat. He had told himself that memory was punishment enough, but Rowan's sentence revealed the arrogance of that. Adrian had preserved a fragment. Rowan had preserved the child. The clinic door opened behind him. Cassian stepped in, face carefully blank. "Sir," he said, "there's movement near the east docks. The Valen crew may be watching the building." Rowan's eyes sharpened. "You brought enemies here." "I came alone." "You never come alone." Rowan turned toward the inner corridor. "Dr. Bell, take Lucien upstairs." Before Dr. Bell could answer, a crash sounded from the back garden. It was not loud. Only the brittle collapse of a clay pot against stone. Yet Rowan was already moving. Adrian followed. The inner corridor led through treatment rooms to a rear door propped open against the damp wind. Beyond it lay a small clinic garden boxed in by brick walls, with medicinal herbs in raised beds and a crooked fig tree near the corner. The garden was empty. Rowan stopped so abruptly Adrian nearly reached for him. On the ground, near the fig tree, lay Lucien's wooden rabbit, one ear broken clean off. Beside it, the back gate moved slowly in the rain. "Lucien," Rowan called. No answer came. The colour left his face, but he did not collapse. He crossed the garden and picked up the rabbit with a hand that had forgotten how to tremble. Only then did Adrian see the mark on the wet brick beside the gate, 3 strokes cut into old mortar. The sign of a rival faction that had hunted Veyron blood for 2 generations. Adrian's voice turned deadly quiet. "Lock down the district." Rowan turned on him, eyes bright with a terror too focused to become tears. "If your people frighten him, if your war touches one hair on his head, it already has." Adrian said. That was the first honest thing he had given Rowan in 5 years. And it was not enough. Rowan pushed past him toward the gate, still clutching the broken rabbit. Adrian caught only the edge of his sleeve before letting go at once. The fabric slipped from his fingers like the last mercy he did not deserve. At the same moment, Cassian's phone rang. He listened for 3 seconds, then looked at Adrian. The lab courier was intercepted before reaching the city. The sample is gone. Rowan heard. His gaze moved slowly from Cassian back to Adrian. No paternity result would arrive. No paper would save or condemn them. No official proof could speak before the child was found. Rain fell harder into the empty garden, washing Lucien's small footprints toward the open gate. The back gate had not finished swaying when Rowan ran through it. Rain had turned the alley behind the clinic into a long grey wound. Rowan moved as if his body had forgotten fear and kept only direction. The broken wooden rabbit was clenched in his fist so tightly that the splintered ear cut into his palm. Behind him, Adrian followed without overtaking him. That restraint cost more than speed. Every instinct in Adrian's body demanded command seal the streets. Drag suspects from their beds. Flood the district with men until the harbour itself confessed. But Rowan's warning remained between them like a drawn blade. If your people frighten him. So Adrian raised one hand to Cassian and gave the order quietly. Lucirens. No family insignia. No one says the word heir. Cassian's gaze flickered, but he obeyed. Understood. Rowan heard it. He did not thank him. Gratitude would have required trust. And trust had not survived the marble hall 5 years ago. He stopped where the alley split toward the east docks and crouched, studying the rain-slick ground. His coat soaked through at the hem. Adrian almost told him to stand, not because Rowan looked weak, but because the sight of him kneeling in rain reopened an old image Adrian had no right to keep. Rowan touched a strip of dark wool caught on a rusted pipe. His sleeve. Adrian crouched beside him, leaving careful space between their shoulders. He passed here. He was walking. Rowan's voice was thin, controlled, terrifying in its restraint, not dragged. Someone made him believe he had to go. Cassian returned from the corner with rain on his lashes. A street vendor saw a woman in a nurse's coat leading a boy toward the old net warehouse. Brown hair. Face covered by an umbrella. Valin mark near the gate was fresh. The Valin crew doesn't take children without leverage, Adrian said. Rowan looked at him then. You sound relieved. I sound precise. You sound like a man deciding whether my son is useful alive. Adrian accepted the words without defense. The worst part was that 5 years ago, Rowan would not have been entirely wrong. He had mastered a world where every life became leverage once named by blood. Lucien is useful only if he is breathing. Unafraid. And return to you, Adrian said. Rowan looked away first. Not softened. Only shaken by the fact that the answer contained no obvious lie. The old net warehouse crouched beside the docks like a rotted beast. Its windows boarded. Its doors warped by salt. Through gaps in the wood, yellow light trembled. Adrian sent Cassian around the rear with 2 men and kept the rest away from the street. Then he removed the gun from beneath his coat and placed it on a stack of crates. Rowan stared at him. What are you doing? If Lucien sees a weapon in my hand, he will remember it before he remembers my face. For a moment, the rain filled the silence between them. Then Rowan took a small folding knife from inside his sleeve. Adrian had not known he carried one. Rowan had learned to arm himself in a life Adrian created by absence. I'm going in first. Rowan said. No. The word came too quickly, edged with old authority. Rowan's face closed. Adrian heard his own mistake and lowered his voice. They lured him with you. If they see you before we know where he is, they may use him to control your next step. And you think they won't use you. They don't know what he is to me yet. Rowan's grip tightened around the knife. Neither does he. That sentence landed harder than accusation. Adrian did not answer because there was no answer clean enough to offer. He moved toward the side entrance. not leading Rowan like a commander, but opening the way like a man requesting permission too late. Inside, the warehouse smelled of wet rope, old fish, and mold. Lucien was seated on a wooden chair beneath a hanging lamp, his hands bound loosely in front of him with packing cord, not tight enough to injure, tight enough to remind him he was small. 3 men stood nearby. A fourth, younger than Adrian expected, leaned against a table with a file envelope in one hand. Elias Corvin had his father's narrow face and none of his patience. The Valen crew were not fools, and that made them dangerous. Adrian Veyron. Elias said, almost smiling. I wondered whether the rumor would pull you out personally. Lucien turned his head. He did not call out. Rowan had taught him caution too well. But his eyes found Adrian's, and something in them tightened with recognition, not trust, not hope. Only the desperate calculation of a child deciding whether this frightening stranger could be used to reach Papa. Adrian's voice became very calm. Let the boy walk out. Is he yours? No. Rowan, hidden in the dark beyond a stack of nets, stopped breathing. Elias laughed softly. That was quick. He is a clinic worker's child who saw something he shouldn't have. If you touch him, I will treat it as an insult to the district under my protection. It was a lie shaped as protection. Adrian watched Lucien carefully as he said it. The boy's mouth pressed together. He did not understand strategy. He only heard denial. Adrian felt the old sin repeat itself in miniature and hated himself for needing the words. Elias's smile faded. You expect me to believe you came unarmed for a stranger's child. I came unarmed because frightened children become unreliable witnesses. Adrian took one step forward. You wanted my attention. You have it. Now decide whether you wanted negotiation or extinction. The lamp swayed above Lucien, throwing shadows over his small face. Rowan moved before Elias could signal his men. He stepped from the darkness behind the chair, knife already cutting through the cord at Lucien's wrists. One of the men lunged, but Adrian struck first fast. Controlled. Brutal only inefficiency. The man hit the table and slid down without a shout. Chaos broke without becoming a battle. Cassian's men entered through the rear. Adrian kept himself between Lucien and the violence. Blocking his view with his own body, Rowan gathered the child against his chest, murmuring his name again and again. Lucien did not cry until his fingers found Rowan's collar. Then the sound came small and furious, as if he resented needing tears at all. Elias was forced to his knees near the door. You're making a mistake. He spat. If the old Veyrons find out, they will find out what I decide they may know. Adrian said. For the first time, Elias looked uncertain. Adrian leaned close enough that only he heard the next words. You saw a frightened child tonight. Nothing else. If his name leaves your mouth again, I will not need a gun. Outside, under the awning of the warehouse, Rowan checked Lucien's wrists with shaking hands. There were red marks but no broken skin. He pressed his forehead to the boy's hair. Eyes closed. Rain dripping from his lashes. Adrian stopped several paces away. He did not approach until Lucien looked at him. You said I wasn't yours, Lucien said. Rowan's arms tightened. Adrian's throat moved once. This was not a council chamber. No lie could be folded into politics here without leaving a wound. I said it so they would not know how to hurt you. Lucien studied him with grave suspicion. Did it work? Yes. Then I don't like that it worked. Adrian had no defense against that either. Dr. Bell examined Lucien in Rowan's apartment an hour later. Books were stacked beneath the table to fix a broken leg. A kettle hissed on a single burner. Children's drawings were pinned beside clinic schedules, most of them in careful black pencil, because colored wax cost more than it should. Lucien had a fever from the pheromone flare and shock. Rowan sat beside the bed, holding a wet cloth to the boy's forehead. Adrian remained near the door until Dr. Port. Bell asked for fever strips from the lower drawer of the cabinet. Rowan did not look away from Lucien. Blue packet, bottom drawer. Adrian opened it. The medicine lay where Rowan said it would. Beneath it, wrapped in oil paper and tied with faded thread, was a small, flat packet. He should have closed the drawer. He knew that. But the thread had been knotted with such care that grief itself seemed to rise from it. The packet slipped when he lifted the medicine. One corner opened. Inside lay a water-stained fragment of an ultrasound photograph. Adrian stopped breathing. It was the matching half. The torn edge would fit the piece locked in his West study drawer. The ink had faded. But Rowan had preserved it as if it were not ruined paper, but a bone of someone beloved. Adrian understood, too late, that Rowan had carried not proof but witness. Someone had needed to remember that the child had existed before accusation. "Don't touch that," Rowan said. Adrian withdrew his hand at once. "I didn't mean to." "I know." Rowan's voice was tired. That never stopped the damage before. The room fell silent except for Lucien's fevered breathing. Adrian closed the drawer gently after taking the medicine. The gentleness did not absolve him. It only made the past more unbearable. At midnight, Rowan allowed the blood test. Not because Adrian demanded it. He did not. "Doctor," Bell explained that Lucien's pheromone instability required matching bloodline data for proper treatment. Rowan listened, asked 3 questions, then rolled up his own sleeve first, so Lucien would not be afraid of the needle. "No one takes his blood while he sleeps," Rowan said. "Then while he watches you," Adrian answered, "and only if you permit it." Rowan's gaze lingered on him, searching for hidden force. Finding none unsettled him more than pressure would have. In the end, Lucien sat on Rowan's lap and endured the tiny needle with his face turned into Rowan's chest. Adrian looked away when the child winced. He had seen men die without blinking. His son's flinch undid him. The result arrived before dawn through Dr. Bell's secure line. She read it once, then lowered the tablet as if it had become too heavy. Rowan did not ask. Adrian already knew from her face. But knowing did not prepare him for the words. Biological paternity confirmed. "Doctor," Bell said quietly. "Direct match. Probability exceeds legal threshold." No thunder answered. No chandelier shattered. The room remained painfully ordinary damp coats by the door. A cooling kettle. Lucien asleep under a patched blanket. Adrian looked at the child and felt the foundation of his life give way without sound. Rowan watched him. Does the paper finally make him real? Adrian closed his eyes. He deserved that. He deserved worse. "No," he said. "It makes me unable to hide behind doubt." Before either of them could speak again, Rowan's old phone vibrated on the table. Only 3 people had the number. 2 were in the room. The message came from an unknown contact. "I served the West Hall the night you were expelled. The evidence was forged inside the Veyron estate. Dr. Marlowe lied. Do not trust Isolde. If you return, bring no child." Rowan read it once. Then he handed the phone to Adrian. Rain tapped softly against the window, and somewhere in the pale edge, before morning, the Veyron house began to wake like a beast that had lied in its sleep for 5 years. Rowan returned to the Veyron estate with his son's hand in his. The gates opened before the car stopped. Iron teeth withdrawing into the rain-dark walls. 5 years had passed. Yet the estate seemed unchanged in the cruel way only old houses could manage. The same black cypresses lined the drive. The same stone wolves watched from the fountain. The same windows reflected the sky without revealing who stood behind them. To Rowan, the place did not look like a home. It looked like a witness that had chosen silence. Lucien sat beside him, unnaturally still. His fever had broken 2 mornings ago, but the kidnapping had left a watchfulness in him that made him seem older than his small hands. He looked through the window with open curiosity and carefully hidden unease. "Did Papa live here?" he asked. Rowan's fingers tightened once around his. For a while. "Did you like it?" The question had no malice. That made it more difficult. Rowan looked at the front steps where he had once stood in the rain without shoes, too proud to faint and too broken to cry properly. Adrian, seated across from them, lowered his gaze as if the same memory had entered him through another door. "No," Rowan said at last, "but I tried to." Lucien absorbed that with the solemnity of a judge hearing a confession. Then he turned to Adrian. "Did you like it?" Adrian looked out at the mansion he had inherited, defended, and allowed to become a weapon against the only people who had needed him gentle. "I mistook owning it for belonging to it." Lucien frowned, not understanding all the words, but hearing enough of the sorrow beneath them to fall silent. At the entrance, the household lined the marble hall as if preparing for ceremony. Servants stood along the walls. Guards remained near the pillars. Above the staircase, the elders waited in black suits, their faces carved from suspicion and offended pride. Isolde Veyron descended last, gloved hand on the railing, her silver hair pinned flawlessly beneath a veil of mourning black, though no one had died. Rowan almost laughed. It would have sounded ugly. "Adrian," Isolde said, her gaze sliding past him to Rowan and then downward to Lucien. "You should have informed the family before bringing strangers into the main house." Adrian did not look at her. "They are not strangers." A murmur moved along the staircase. Lucien's grip tightened around Rowan's fingers. Rowan stepped slightly in front of him. Not enough to hide him. Only enough to remind every eye in the hall that the child was not being presented for inspection. Isolde's smile dimmed by a fraction. "Then perhaps we should speak privately." "No," Rowan said. The word surprised the hall more than Adrian's declaration had. 5 years ago, Rowan had been the quiet Omega who lowered his eyes when elders discussed bloodline purity over dinner. He had been polite even when insulted, silent even when humiliated. That boy had died somewhere between the estate gate and a bus station floor. The man who stood there now had learned that silence could shelter love, but it could also feed lies if given to the wrong people. Isolde turned to him with delicate patience. "This is a family matter." Rowan looked at the chandelier. He remembered fragments of ultrasound paper falling beneath that same light. "It became my family matter when your house threw my unborn child into the rain." The words struck the servants first. Several lowered their heads. One older maid covered her mouth and turned away. On the stairs, Dr. Marlowe stood behind an elder, pale enough to seem already ill. Rowan recognized him instantly. He had worn the same fear 5 years ago. Though then Rowan had mistaken it for guiltless discomfort, Adrian followed Rowan's gaze. "Dr. Marlowe." The doctor flinched. "Sir, you will remain where I can see you." Isolde's eyes cooled. Interrogating physicians in front of servants is beneath the dignity of this family. The dignity of this family, Adrian said, was not injured by servants. It was injured by forgery. The hall changed. A few people looked at Isolde before they could stop themselves. That was the first crack, not proof. Not confession. Only the instinctive direction of fear. Rowan felt Adrian notice it too. He had always been observant in rooms of danger. He had simply failed in the room where love required the same attention. Cassian entered with a sealed case and placed it on the central table. Inside were documents gathered through the night-old guard schedules. payment records, laboratory routing logs, and the original transfer file from the hotel Rowan had supposedly visited. The forged evidence had been elegant enough to convince a wounded husband. It was less elegant when stripped apart by a man who no longer wanted to be convinced. Marlowe signed the pregnancy blood panel 2 days before Rowan was accused. Cassian said he also signed a second compatibility report that never entered the family archive. Adrian opened a folder and slid a page across the table. His face remained controlled, but the violence had left his hands. He did not throw the truth at Rowan like a trophy. He set it down as something too late to be useful. Rowan read the top line. Paternal markers consistent with Adrian Veyron. For a moment, the room blurred. Rowan had known. His body had known. Lucien's face had known. Still, seeing the proof from 5 years ago made something old and buried twist awake in his chest. There had been a document. There had been truth before exile. Someone had seen it and chosen the lie. Lucien tugged his sleeve. Papa. Rowan folded the paper once with care and handed it back. I'm all right. He was not. But children deserved lies that protected them from adult ruins. Adrian's gaze remained on Dr. Kepter. Marlowe. Why was this withheld? The doctor's mouth opened. No sound came. His eyes flicked toward Isolde, and that small betrayal ended him. Adrian stepped forward. Not fast. Not dramatic. Simply enough that the hall remembered who he had been before guilt made him quiet. Marlowe's knees weakened. I was told the first result might be contaminated. By whom? By whom? Isolde Sihil softly, as if disappointed by poor theatre. Doctors are often cautious when omega pregnancies involve stress. You were unstable then. Adrian. Grief makes men eager to blame. Rowan almost admired her. She did not deny first. She rearranged morality. She made every accusation sound like concern, wearing a better coat. Adrian turned to her. You changed the guard schedule that week. I manage household security. You dismissed the 2 men assigned to Rowan. They were careless. You paid Marlowe's debts. I have supported many dependents of this family. And you sent Milo Saye to follow Rowan after I expelled him. Isolde's silence lasted half a heartbeat too long. There it was, the second crack. Rowan looked at Adrian. His face had gone still, but not in the old way. This was not refusal to feel. This was a man standing at the edge of the pit he had dug and finally seeing the bottom. I believed you, Adrian said to Isolde. Each word quiet enough to force the hall closer, because you gave me a lie shaped like my fear. Isolde's expression hardened. I protected the bloodline from dilution and manipulation. That omega had already changed you. Rowan felt Lucien stiffen beside him. The child did not understand all the politics of blood purity, but he understood contempt when it pointed at his father. Adrian's voice lost its last softness. Say his name. Isolde looked at Rowan as one might look at rain tracked across marble. Rowan Hale was unsuitable. His name, Adrian said, is Rowan. It should not have mattered. A name could not undo fever, hunger, childbirth alone, nights listening for footsteps in a clinic corridor. Yet Rowan felt the impact of it because Adrian had not said it as possession this time. He said it as correction, as witness, as an answer arriving years after the wound had already scarred. One elder struck his cane against the stair. Enough, whether the child is Adrian's or not. Matters of succession must be handled by counsel. The boy requires evaluation, registration, and relocation to the estate for proper alpha discipline. Lucien stepped behind Rowan at the word relocation. Rowan's voice was very calm. No. The elder blinked. unused to being refused by someone he had once considered furniture with a pulse. You do not understand what he is. I understand better than anyone here, Rowan said. He wakes from nightmares without making noise because he thinks fear is troublesome. He likes bitter tea because sweet things were expensive. He counts exits in every room before choosing where to sit. That is what your family made him before ever meeting him. No one answered. Lucien's fingers twisted into Rowan's coat. Adrian stared at the child as if each sentence had removed another layer of skin. He had thought of heirs as future rulers, blood as continuity, succession as duty. Rowan had described a boy, a little boy shaped by hiding, thrift, and fear. Why aren't there pictures of me here? Lucien asked suddenly. The question was small. It undid the room completely. Adrian looked down at him. For once, power offered him nothing. There were no portraits of infant Lucien in the nursery wing. No silver rattle engraved with his name. No first birthday feast. No physician records. No room kept ready. There was only half a photograph in a locked drawer and a father who had called truth a lie. Rowan touched Lucien's hair. His eyes did not leave Adrian, because this house rejected you before you could breathe. Adrian's face changed then. Not dramatically. He did not fall. Did not rage. Did not turn his grief into spectacle. But something essential in him folded inward. He looked at Lucien and bowed his head. Not as the Veyron head to an heir, but as a man before the child he had failed before birth. I have no answer that does not shame me, Adrian said. Lucien considered him for a long time. Then he asked, Will shame make you kinder? Rowan closed his eyes. Adrian looked at the boy with unbearable care. Only if I let it. By evening, the estate had divided into whispers. Marlowe was confined under guard. The elders retreated into locked rooms to debate legitimacy and damage. Cassian moved through the house, gathering more names. Adrian ordered the nursery wing sealed. Not to prepare it for Lucien, but to prevent anyone from staging welcome like another form of theft. Rowan stood alone in the conservatory where rain tapped against the glass roof. He had sent Lucien to rest in a guest room with Dr. Bell nearby. He should have remained with him. But the child had fallen asleep, clutching Rowan's sleeve, and murmured, I'm not scared if you're still in the house. So Rowan had stayed within the walls he hated. Because courage in children was often only trust wearing a brave face. Isolde entered without announcement. Rowan did not turn. Have you come to call me unsuitable again? I came to speak to the only person in this house who understands what Adrian becomes when he is emotionally compromised. That made Rowan look at her. Isolde's face had lost its public softness. Without witnesses, she appeared older and more human, which somehow made her worse. You think I wanted cruelty for its own sake? She asked. Adrian was 29 when he took power. Half the families wanted him dead. You made him hesitate. You made him look back before making decisions. Men like him do not survive tenderness. Then perhaps men like him should not rule. For the first time, Isolde smiled with something close to respect. That is exactly why you were dangerous. She stepped closer. Rain patterned her black sleeves with trembling light. The council will try to take the child. Adrian will burn the council to stop them. The rivals will smell division. Menvildi. Your son will grow up behind bulletproof glass, worshipped and hunted in equal measure. Rowan said nothing. Isolde's voice lowered. Leave tonight. Take the boy. I will give you money. Documents. A country where even Adrian cannot easily reach. Disappear again. And I will bury the succession claim myself. And if I refuse, then stay. Isolde said softly. Watch Adrian turn your child into the reason he destroys the family. Watch the family turn your child into a weapon. Either way. Rowan. You will lose the boy you tried so hard to save. She placed a passport envelope on the wet stone bench between them. Rowan looked down at it. Then through the glass toward the black shape of the estate, reflected around him like a cage. Outside the conservatory doors, Adrian stopped in the dark corridor. He had heard enough. The passport envelope lay between Rowan and Isolde like a second accusation. For a while, neither touched it. Rain travelled down the conservatory glass in long, trembling veins, turning the estate lights outside into blurred gold. Rowan could hear the mansion breathing through its old walls, footsteps in corridors, distant doors, the low voices of men already dividing his son into legal categories: child, alpha, heir, liability, weapon. No one said Lucien's name when they wanted to own him. Rowan looked at Isolde. You expect me to believe you would let us go. I expect you to understand that I prefer a disappeared problem to a public civil war. Isolde's gloved hand rested near the envelope without touching it. You have always been practical beneath all that quiet dignity. Sentiment may make you hesitate, but fear has kept your son alive. Listen to fear now. Outside the doors, Adrian stood in the corridor without moving. This was the house he had allowed to raise him, beautiful enough to host mourning, patient enough to manufacture exile, intelligent enough to call cruelty prevention. Once, he had mistaken Isolde's calm for loyalty. Now, he heard it clearly. She loved the Veyron name more than anyone bearing it. Rowan's voice stayed even. If I leave, Adrian will search. Only if he knows how. Isolde opened the envelope and slid out a passport, identity papers, a bank card, and a silver flash drive. These are cleaner than anything you used in the harbour. I am not offering mercy. I am offering efficiency. Take the boy away before the council binds him to the succession. Adrian keeps his throne. The family survives. Your son grows up poor in peace rather than powerful in a cage. Poor in peace. The word struck too close to tenderness. She had not offered an obvious lie. She offered a future made of compromises Rowan had already chosen once: hunger over capture, anonymity over bloodline, loneliness over the risk of Lucien being loved by those who would devour him. And Adrian Rowan asked. Isolde's mouth softened, almost sadly. Adrian will endure. He was built for endurance. The door opened behind them. No, Adrian said. I was trained for it. There is a difference. Isolde turned without flinching, but something in her eyes tightened. Rowan did not step back when Adrian entered. He came in wet from the corridor shadows. Tie loosened, face stripped of the ceremonial coldness that made men obey. He looked dangerous still, but no longer untouchable. Adrian's gaze fell to the passport envelope. How far? Rowan's fingers closed around Lucien's broken wooden rabbit inside his pocket. Far enough. If I choose well. You would have left without telling me. You left me no habit of relying on you. Isolde seized that silence like a blade offered hilt first. You hear him. Let them go. You can still control the announcement. Name the pregnancy report forged by rivals. Deny the child. And close the matter before the council forces. Enough. Adrian did not look at her. You have mistaken my shame for permission. For the first time in Rowan's memory, Isolde's composure cracked openly. Your shame is irrelevant. The council has already filed an emergency petition. By dawn, they can demand Lucien's registration under Veyron custody. If the boy is confirmed as your heir, Rowan's rights become negotiable under family law. Rowan's blood went cold. Family law, the old private codes of the Mafia houses, dressed in legal language and enforced by money. Physicians, judges, and men who never signed their own threats. One day, back inside the estate, and the net had already begun to close, Adrian turned toward Cassian, who appeared at the door behind him. "How many signatures?" "5 elders." Cassian said, "2 more pending." They argue Lucian's unregistered alpha flare proves Rowan cannot manage his development safely. Rowan almost laughed. They had ignored Lucien before birth and now called his hidden survival neglect. He imagined Lucien asleep upstairs, fever-warm and brave, unaware that adults were building cages around him while he dreamed. "I'll leave tonight," Rowan said. Adrian looked at him. Rowan expected anger. He expected command. Argument. The old alpha impulse to close a fist around anything slipping away. Instead, Adrian only looked as if something inside him had accepted a sentence before it was read aloud. "All right," Adrian said. The word disoriented Rowan more than refusal could have. Isolde stared at him. Cassian lowered his eyes. Adrian walked to the bench, picked up the passport envelope, and examined the documents. These may pass border checks, but not Veyron finance trackers. Isolde kept a recall thread in the bank card. He broke the card between 2 fingers and dropped the pieces into a planter. The passports may hold. The transfer drive won't. Isolde went very still. Adrian. He handed the remaining papers to Cassian. Replace everything. New route. No family accounts. No estate vehicles. Use the South Coast corridor. Place custody authority under Rowan Vale and Rowan Hale. Both identities. Medical consent. School access. Guardianship. Travel authorization. No Veyron override. Cassian inhaled once. "That will require your seal." "It will have it." Rowan stared at him. "What are you doing?" Adrian finally turned to him. In his eyes there was no demand. No softened plea disguised as sacrifice. Only recognition sharpened by ruin. "Giving you what I should have given you 5 years ago. Money. Choice." The word entered Rowan quietly. For 5 years, he had survived by making choices inside shrinking rooms. Which bill to delay, which record to erase, which street to avoid when Lucien smelled too strongly of alpha. Isolde's voice cut through the moment. "If he leaves with the boy, you lose the heir." Adrian looked at her then, and the room remembered the man who could end wars with a sentence. "If I keep the boy by taking him from Rowan, I lose my son." That was when Rowan's composure nearly failed. Adrian did not reach for him. Perhaps that was why Rowan remained standing. Touch would have demanded an answer his heart could not survive giving. Distance, for once, was the most merciful thing Adrian offered. By midnight, the estate had become a battlefield without gunfire. Adrian convened the council in the central hall. Beneath the chandelier where the ultrasound had once fallen in pieces, Rowan stood at the top of the side stairs with Lucien wrapped in a dark coat beside him. The child had insisted on coming down after waking to find Rowan packing. The repaired rabbit clutched against his chest. The elders arrived, furious and perfumed with legal certainty. Isolde stood among them, pale with contained rage. Adrian placed the original pregnancy report, Marlowe's confession, payment records, and the forged accusation file on the table. Marlowe has confessed to falsifying the secondary report under pressure from Isolde Veyron. Adrian said, "The child born from Rowan Hale's pregnancy is my biological son. His name is Lucien Hale. He will not be registered as Veyron property." An elder slammed his cane down. "You cannot reject succession protocol. I am dissolving the authority by which this council enforces it." The hall erupted. Rowan felt Lucien flinch but not retreat. The boy's eyes fixed on Adrian below, trying to understand why the frightening man from the clinic now stood alone before a room of wolves. Adrian removed the signet ring from his finger and set it beside the documents. For 5 years, Adrian continued. This family concealed the truth of my child's existence and used a forged accusation to exile his father. Any council built on that lie has no legitimacy to judge either of them. You would destroy your own house for an omega, another elder said. Adrian's gaze lifted to Rowan. It did not hold possession. It held accountability, which was heavier. No, I destroyed enough when I failed him. This is only the part that comes after. Something shifted in the hall. Painful because it was believable Adrian telling the truth when lying would have preserved his power. The council's petition died before dawn. Drowned not by mercy but by scandal. Cassian leaked enough evidence to make every elder fear outside prosecution. Marlowe signed a sworn confession. Isolde's private accounts were frozen. The Veyron estate, that ancient machine of blood and obedience, lurched under the weight of its own exposed bones. Rowan packed one small bag for himself and one for Lucien. Adrian met him at the front steps while rain fell through the blue-black hour before morning. It was the same hour, Rowan thought. When he had once left barefoot with no umbrella and no name, he dared keep. Now a car waited beyond the fountain with new plates. A driver Cassian trusted, and documents no Veyron elder could recall. Lucien slept in the back seat. Fever gone. Rabbit tucked under his chin. Rowan stood beneath the portico. You could still stop us. Yes, Adrian said. Neither pretended otherwise. Then why don't you? Adrian took something from inside his coat. He unfolded his hand. And there lay the other half of the ultrasound photograph. Aged and carefully preserved. Its torn edge matched the fragment Rowan had kept through hunger. Childbirth. And exile. Rain mist touched Adrian's sleeve. But he shielded the paper with the instinct of a man holding something living. I kept it, he said. Not because I believed. Because some cowardly part of me wanted punishment without truth. Rowan could not look away. Adrian lowered himself onto one knee on the wet stone. The sight moved through Rowan like a shock. Not because kneeling erased anything, but because the last time Rowan had been on his knees in this rain, Adrian had stood behind warm walls. Now the cold reached them both. I was his father before I deserved to be. Adrian said, I was your husband before I understood what protection meant. I cannot ask you to stay. I will not ask you to forgive me. But take this. He should have his whole first picture, even if I was absent from every day after it. Rowan's hand shook when he accepted the fragment. Their fingers brushed for the first time in 5 years. The contact was brief, almost accidental, and full of everything neither could bear to say. For a moment, Rowan thought of the life that might have existed if trust had been stronger than fear, morning light on the ultrasound. Lucien's first fever. First word. First stubborn refusal to sleep. Such thoughts were dangerous because they were tender, and tenderness had once nearly killed him. He stepped back. Adrian remained on one knee, rain darkening his hair. His face lifted only enough to watch Rowan leave if Rowan chose to. Rowan walked to the car. At the door, he paused and looked back. Adrian had not moved. The Veyron estate rose behind him, wounded and awake, its windows burning with the aftermath of truth. Rowan held the two halves of the ultrasound in one hand, not yet joined, not yet discarded. Adrian, he said. The name changed Adrian's face before he could hide it. Rowan wanted to offer something. Hatred. Perhaps. A final sentence. A clean ending sharp enough to protect them both. But Lucien shifted in the car, murmuring in his sleep. And Rowan remembered that every future worth having had to begin somewhere quieter than revenge. Live long enough to become someone he can know, Rowan said. Then he got in. By morning, the car had left the capital road and turned south toward the sea. When the sun rose, The room prepared for Lucien in the Veyron estate remained empty. On the desk, Adrian found no farewell letter. Only the broken half of the bank card Isolde had offered, placed beside a strip of gauze from Lucien's rabbit. Adrian stood over it for a long time. Then he called Cassian and began dismantling his inheritance. For 3 months, Adrian Veyron did not search for Rowan. He knew where the car had gone by the second day. Cassian was too efficient, and Adrian too familiar with the old routes of disappearance. Not to know. South Coast Corridor, then the fishing town of Greyhaven, then a narrow apartment above a shuttered bookshop whose owner asked no questions if rent arrived in cash. Adrian received these facts in sealed reports and burned each one unread after the first line. Location was not permission. Knowledge was not a summons. He had spent years confusing the two. Instead, he turned toward the house that had taught him to hold people like territory and began taking it apart. The Veyron estate did not collapse dramatically. Old power rarely died with flames. It died in ledgers, resignations, sealed testimonies, and men discovering that loyalty purchased by fear became very expensive once fear changed direction. Adrian removed council authority over family custody first, then the private clinics, then the judges who had mistaken Veyron favors for tradition. By winter, 5 elders had left the capital under plea agreements. Dr. Marlowe had testified behind closed doors, and Isolde Veyron lived in the eastern wing under house confinement, surrounded by ancestral portraits that offered no advice. Some called it political exhaustion. Some called it strategic cleansing. Rivals whispered that the Veyron head had gone soft because of an omega and an unregistered child. Adrian let them whisper. Silence. He had learned too late. Could sometimes hear what power talked over. In Greyhaven, Rowan learned of these changes through traces rather than announcements. A clinic debt disappeared from his account without anyone admitting payment. The school that had refused Lucien's paperwork suddenly accepted his registration after receiving corrected documentation. 2 men asking questions near the harbour left town after a quiet conversation with someone Rowan never saw. None of it bore Adrian's name. That anonymity was the only reason Rowan did not immediately pack. Is he doing it? Lucien asked one evening, standing on a chair to help wash cups. Rowan glanced at him. Who? Lucien gave him a look too old for 6 years and 3 months. The man from the big house. The man. Not father. Not Adrian. Not yet. Rowan took the cup before it slipped from soapy fingers. Perhaps. Are you angry? Rowan dried the rim slowly. Outside. The sea wind rattled the thin windows of their rented apartment. It sounded different from rain against the Veyron estate. Less like judgment. More like warning. I am many things. Lucien considered this seriously. Can many things include tired? Despite himself. Rowan smiled. It was small and uneven, but real enough that Lucien's eyes brightened. Rowan touched the child's damp hair, feeling the strong warmth of him, the pulse of a life no one had managed to erase. Yes, many things includes tired. The first letter arrived in late spring. It contained no apology. Only copies of legal documents' guardianship confirmed solely under Rowan's authority. Lucien's medical privacy sealed. Veyron succession claims formally revoked unless Lucien chose otherwise as an adult. At the bottom, in Adrian's severe handwriting, was one sentence. No answer is required. Rowan read that sentence more times than he read the documents. The absence of demand unsettled him. Adrian had always entered rooms with gravity, bending everyone toward response. This letter stood at the threshold and did not knock. He placed it in a drawer beside the repaired ultrasound photograph. 2 weeks later, Lucien found Adrian sitting on the seawall. Rowan had taken him to the beach after school because the boy had begun releasing faint alpha pressure during arithmetic lessons whenever another child took his pencils. Dr. Bell said it was normal development complicated by stress. Rowan translated that into simpler words. Lucien was growing too fast inside a world that had taught him danger too early. Adrian was alone, wearing a dark coat too formal for the salt wind. No guards stood nearby. No car waited in sight. He looked thinner than Rowan remembered. Not weakened exactly, but stripped of the arrogance that had once made even grief look expensive. Lucien saw him first. He stopped with a shell in one hand. "You're here." Adrian stood slowly. His eyes moved to Rowan before returning to the child, asking without words whether he was allowed to answer. Rowan hated that the hesitation mattered. "I had business in the south," Adrian said. Lucien looked around the empty beach. "On the sea wall?" "No." A pause. "That part is not business." The child absorbed the honesty, then walked closer. Rowan forced himself not to reach for him. Adrian did not move forward. He let Lucien decide the distance. "Did you fix your house?" Lucien asked. Adrian's mouth curved faintly. Not quite a smile. "Not yet. I removed some broken rooms." "Rooms can't be guilty." "No," Adrian said, "but people hide inside them." Lucien nodded as if this made perfect sense. Then he held out the shell. "This one looks like a tooth." Adrian accepted it with both hands. The gesture was absurdly careful. Rowan saw it and turned his face toward the sea because some tenderness was unbearable precisely when it was deserved. Lucien spoke to Adrian for 11 minutes, mostly about school, a gull with one foot, and the superiority of bitter tea. Adrian answered each topic as if it were a council matter requiring full attention. When Lucien ran ahead to chase foam at the waterline, Adrian remained where he was. "You should not come without warning." Rowan said, "I know." Cassian informed Dr. Bell. She said today would be least disruptive. "I should have written first." "You should have." "I will next time." Next time. The words did not presume, yet they placed a fragile cup on the table between them. Rowan could smash it. Adrian seemed ready to accept that too. "Why are you here?" Rowan asked. Adrian's answer came after a long silence. "Because Lucien asked Cassian, through Dr. Bell, whether I still had the other half of the rabbit's ear." Rowan blinked. Adrian reached into his coat and took out a small wrapped packet. Inside lay a carved wooden ear, carefully shaped and polished. Not attached, because attachment required permission. The craftsmanship was too precise for a purchased toy. Rowan imagined Adrian at a desk, large hands learning the size of a child's broken rabbit. Failing. Trying again. He wanted to know if broken things can keep their missing parts somewhere else. Adrian said. Rowan's throat tightened. "What did you tell him?" "That keeping is not the same as repairing." For once, Rowan had no sharp reply. The visits became monthly, then irregular by Rowan's choice. Adrian always wrote first. Sometimes Rowan refused. When he did, Adrian did not send gifts in retaliation or silence in injury. He simply answered, "Understood." Another time, "If permitted." That patience angered Rowan in a complicated way. It gave him no surface to push against. No proof that Adrian was still the man who would mistake refusal for betrayal. Lucien changed with the rhythm of it. He stopped calling Adrian the man from the big house and began using his name. Later. One rainy afternoon, after Adrian sat 3 hours beside his fever bed without touching him unless asked, Lucien woke and murmured, "Father." Water. Adrian froze her. Rowan, standing in the doorway with a towel in his hands, felt the room tilt around that single word. Adrian did not look triumphant. He looked terrified. He poured the water, held the cup, and waited until Lucien drank before lowering his head as if accepting a blade. Afterward, in the kitchen, Rowan said, "Do not make him regret that." Adrian stood by the sink, rain silvering the window behind him. "I would rather he take it back than feel trapped by it." "You say the right things now." "I know." Adrian's voice was rougher than usual. "It is easier than having been right when it mattered." The honesty struck somewhere Rowan had tried to seal. He looked at Adrian and saw, not the man beneath the chandelier, not entirely, but someone living in the wreckage of that man's choices without decorating it as redemption. It did not free Rowan from pain, but it made the pain less lonely. Years did not heal cleanly. They softened some edges and revealed others. Lucien grew tall enough that his alpha presence filled doorways before he did. He chose music over combat training, bitter tea over sweet desserts, and Rowan's surname in school records because, as he told a startled clerk, "My father earned it first." Adrian heard of this and said nothing except to have the paperwork protected from challenge. Isolde died before Lucien turned 10. In the eastern wing, where rain tapped against painted windows, she left no apology. Only a letter addressed to Adrian, stating that she had done what survival required. Adrian burned it unread in the courtyard. Rowan watched from the steps. Neither of them spoke of forgiveness. Some ghosts did not deserve ceremonies. On Lucien's 11th birthday, he asked to visit the Veyron estate. Rowan nearly refused. Adrian, who had come to Greyhaven with a plain cake Lucien pretended not to like, said only, "Not unless your papa agrees." Lucien looked at Rowan, not pleading, waiting. That was when Rowan understood that the estate no longer existed only as the place he had been expelled from. To Lucien, it was also the place his father had been born, the place a broken history might be faced without being obeyed. They went in early summer. The gates were open, not ceremonially, but because Adrian had ordered the outer walls lowered and half the guards dismissed years before. The hall beneath the chandelier had changed. The old council portraits were gone. The marble remained, polished and cold. But sunlight entered now through curtains no one had been allowed to close. Lucien walked through slowly. "This is smaller than I imagined." Rowan laughed under his breath. Adrian looked at him when he heard it, and the years between them shifted. Not vanished. Shifted. That evening, rain returned. They sat in the west study while Lucien slept on the long sofa, one arm thrown over his eyes, looking suddenly younger than his height allowed. On the table before him lay the repaired ultrasound photograph in a simple frame, two torn halves joined by a thin seam, visible because Rowan had refused to hide the break. Adrian stood beside the window. Rowan sat near the fire, close enough to warmth, far enough from old habits. "I used to think forgiveness was a door," Rowan said, "that one day I would either open it or keep it closed." Adrian did not turn around. "And now I think it is a house built badly after a fire. Some rooms can be entered. Some floors still collapse." Adrian's reflection in the glass bowed its head. "Then I will learn when not to step." Rowan looked at him for a long time. The rain did not sound like the night of exile anymore. It sounded like weather, ordinary and passing, touching roof and window without choosing sides. "You may stay for breakfast," he said. Adrian closed his eyes. It was not a confession. It was not a return, but in the language they had earned through years of restraint. It was a hand extended across a room neither of them wanted to flee. Much later, when Lucien woke and found them both still there, he said nothing. He only shifted until his head rested against Rowan's thigh and his feet pressed shamelessly into Adrian's lap. Adrian looked down at the contact, as if entrusted with a kingdom more fragile than any he had surrendered. Outside, rain washed the estate clean without pretending it had never been stained.